Bryan Krahn, welcome back to the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. What's good, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day. I'm above ground. What could be
100%.
better?
Dude, excited to have the opportunity to catch back up with you. We recently had a conversation. I'm not sure exactly what episode, but it was probably about 8 or 10 weeks ago. And it was a really good conversation. And we had a lot of positive feedback on that. And so I thought it would be warranted to reach back out and see if we couldn't get you back on the show for a follow-up so that we could dive a little bit deeper. You know, one of the things that I think that we experience with these types of podcast conversations is invariably because of time and people's attention, like they end up being overtly superficial. And while I do think that we were able to kind of dive into some nuanced stuff, especially I appreciate, us having the ability to talk about your background and kind of trajectory through coaching and where you are now and how you serve, kind of the 40-year-old plus market as far as a quote unquote niche. I wanted the opportunity just to kind of see if we couldn't get a little more granular with some topics that I think people generally struggle with. And honestly, this is for as much for my own benefit as it is for everyone else. So with all of that said, dude, thank you for coming back on the show.
Hey, man, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So, we were just kind of catching up right before we hit record. And you mentioned that you're kind of committing to a few more speaking engagements. I've seen your name, popping up here and there a little bit more. I'm curious, just, generally speaking, like what is the impetus been towards that, endeavor, a little more speaking and education?
Well, it's something I find extremely challenging to do well. I'm not a gifted speaker by any means. I'm a pretty good writer, but not a good speaker. So it's something that I like to challenge myself as much as I can. And since I'm too damn old to challenge myself in the weight room much anymore, I got to kind of stay in my lane there. It's just a way to grow, and and I find that the pressure of doing that, even like just doing this podcast. I mean, before we got on the air, I was, going over all my podcasting questions with you and stuff, and I just find that process, that little bit of anxiety and that little bit of nervousness, it just gets my brain moving a little bit faster. And I find I can just develop ideas that maybe I take for granted. They're in the back of my mind and I use them in my day-to-day work. But all of a sudden now I got to share them with just on a different audience, different medium. And it's basically just makes me a better communicator and I think a better coach in the long run.
Yeah, I'd actually really agree with you there. And I'd be lying if I didn't say like every single podcast episode that I do, it's kind of like butterflies in my stomach, like nervous. And to be honest, like there's always this little nagging pull of like, I should just fucking cancel it. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't want to blow it. It's kind of self-worth. Like, who am I to be doing this stuff? And I was just curious if there was any of that, perhaps that's pulled at you over the years because you've been doing this a long time. And I have similarly, and I've experienced that.
And I know, and on the one hand, you think, oh, that's terrible that you feel that way, or you'll get over it kind of thing. But I like it because it just, when I feel that nervous about doing something, obviously I'm much more like I'm prepping and I'm like I'm focusing and I don't know, I'm just kind of just digging up these old skill sets that I had back in, 25 years ago in university. So it's,
Cool. Well, it's nice to see, and I'm glad that you're putting yourself out there, and it's motivating for me as well. So let's kind of jump into stuff here. I've got kind of a milieu of questions that I'd love to throw your way based on our previous conversations. But one of the things that's been percolating a little bit since we last spoke that I've been observing in our industry is sort of, I don't know if it's a shifting of priorities or a shifting of goals, but and you've been doing this longer than I have, or at least you've been working with this population longer than I have. But when we speak with, let's just say men and women over 40, whatever, perhaps there's this, for meatheads like us, like we always think that everyone is interested in gaining muscle and losing fat, and right. And oftentimes that's the terminology that we use, which sometimes can be flat out offensive for people. Like, why wouldn't you want to lose fat? Like, that's just ridiculous. But that's not actually the main motivator for a lot of people. And I think we can agree that health, longevity, setting a great example for our kids is there. I'm curious what you're seeing and experiencing and perhaps having conversations around with respect to like mental health nowadays, and how we leverage nutrition and exercise, if at all, to be able to kind of help people work through what might be a regressing issue.
That's it. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, when you talk about mental health, like first let's look at like the mechanical, like the brain health. And I was just listening to Peter Attia just in the car today, and just according to him, the data is unequivocal. The number one thing you could do for your mental health to avoid Alzheimer's, dementia, it's not even diet, it's exercise. That's the biggest lever that you can pull. So there's that aspect. But in terms of the other, when people think of mental health, they probably think more of like well-being and avoiding depression and stuff like that. I don't really have many people seeking, inquire about coaching and say, I'm just feeling kind of down.
Yeah.
That's always a side effect of a successful, whether it's a fat loss goal or just getting in shape goal. That is always people. That's one of the number one things they report is that I just feel better about myself, and I'm better with my marriage is better. My relationship with my kids is better. I'm more productive. And I think one thing I've learned is that everything's connected, and you can't separate the body from the mind. And when you get, when one starts to degrade, the other is sure to follow, and the opposite is true.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Like, I think, as time goes by, we're going to see more people actually kind of skipping that step of, I decided to get in shape to lose weight, and wow, I feel so much better. I'm so much happier. Maybe they'll actually just, I want to be happier, I'm going to get in shape. Maybe they'll actually skip that,
Yeah, well, I mean, that might be very relevant just with sort of like, I don't know, but like body positivity is like, maybe people don't generally care as much about body comp as we did growing up in the 80s. And, and it's more socially acceptable, which is fine. I do think being our age, or, being in our 40s and 50s, is we don't really resonate with this kind of mental health. Maybe it hasn't really been identified through our era, but younger populations, and we don't need to get too far down the rabbit hole, but definitely like younger populations. My sister, she's in HR, so she's got for a bigger company, and so she's got a lot of 20 and 30-year-old employees, and it's like a legitimate sort of, I'll say, excuse for lack of a better term. Right? I'm not dismissing it, but I'm saying is people are legitimately taking like mental health days. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a net positive, that move of like that social acceptance of taking care of your mental health. I just like growing up, I had a very kind of basically I hung out with a lot of nerds, and probably half of us were seeing therapists. And we used to be like, in our little circle, like, oh, my therapist said this. It was just a big secret, like, don't tell anybody you see a therapist.
Yeah.
Everyone, it's just not taboo anymore. As it shouldn't be, especially if you're going through something dramatic or, but yeah, it is, there's a flip side to everything. I mean, and I've kind of finding, maybe this is the boomer in me, but like, you don't need a mental health day. You need to go out and have a good day's work.
Yeah.
Go to the gym. Personally, I think if you're not exhausting yourself in the gym, then you're not exhausting all your options to feel better. So,
and that's where I just think there's so much validity. And, you said it based on the science is like, well, are you moving your body? Because we can kind of coddle you all you want and leverage antidepressants, and anti-anxiety meds. And blah, blah, blah. But like, dude, if you're not moving and then you're not fueling yourself correctly, well, our options are definitely going to be limited.
You're not giving your body a fighting chance, or your mind a fighting chance. Yeah.
So one of the things that we discussed in our last conversation was just a lot of the nuances of how someone treats their training and their nutrition perhaps differently than when they're younger. And when we're younger, it's kind of like we have seemingly all the time in the world to be able to train and structure meals and not have very many responsibilities, even though we feel quote unquote busy all of the time. It's nothing in our 20s relative to our 40s, especially if we have kids and a career and what have you. And one of the things that you mentioned was a lot of the success that men and women have as we get older has to do with how we structure our day, right? And so in your experience, I guess I would love just some practical application guidance around, what have you observed to help people be successful from a, application standpoint around daily structure, meals. Perhaps we can kind of go in any direction with this.
Well, yeah, that is the most important thing. That is this, I don't want to say it's the secret sauce, but that is structure. Like, structure is everything. And as anyone with kids will know, I mean, that gets tested. So especially if you have little kids, it gets tested. And I've gone through that myself. I've had my kid much later in life, and it's very much a creature of habit. Get up, have my meals, train, all the overgrown meathead lifestyle. Then all of a sudden, there's this little person who needs me. When their needs have to come first, and it is a challenge. But if you can, like, the value of structure is that it obviously helps you be more consistent, which, consistency is the biggest driver in this whole process. It's not so much being perfect or hitting all your meals or hitting all your workouts, and hitting PRs. Is just consistently doing the best you can. If you're always hitting around 85, 90% week after week, you are going to make dramatic changes. And structure allows you to have that level of consistency. And again, it gets harder when you have a family, and you especially have a young family, and you're a busy job. And sadly, that is why basically everybody gets up really early. Yeah. And if there's one thing that I think that's consistent above everyone in that kind of, that 40, 50 something bubble, the young family and the busy job and all the demands, aging parents, all these things, demands in your time, is that they get up early, and that time when the house is quiet, that's when they either do their most important task at work, or they get that workout in. I get up so early, I do a little bit of both. Right. Because otherwise you just lose control of your day. Like, because you're serving other people. You can't just be serving yourself anymore. So, but yeah, that is probably, and that also is huge for mental health, because if you can create this set of structure in your life where you're productive and you're getting things done, it's very reaffirming and it feels good. Like, okay, I'm doing the things I need to do every day. I'm getting my work done. I got my workout in, got my meals all prepped. If you could have that, it snowballs. Definitely. Yeah. It's really just stacking those wins like every single day, and like allowing you to have control. Whereas normally we're just like on reaction mode all of the time, putting out fires. And fortunately and unfortunately, is most of us are in positions now where we have the ability to work from wherever we are. Yeah. Which is a double-edged sword, because we're working from wherever we are. And where it perhaps used to be is like, I'm going to show up at the office at 8, I'm going to check out at 4 or 5. It's like, no, I'm starting work at 6 a.m. and then I'll take a break for the kids and get them off to school. And then I'll be working again, and I'll squeeze in a workout sometime. And then like kids come home, and then we'll do dinner, and then I'll be work again. And it's like, again, while that might be beneficial for some people, it also acts as a massive deterrent, because we're never truly in control of our time. Yeah, it is interesting. And the name of the principle escapes me, I'm sure you know, but if you wake up and you have, so you wake up at 5 a.m., you're an early riser, you have all this time to do your tasks, but your tasks will expand to the amount of time that you allow for them. always in the winter, especially, where I live, it's so cold in the winter that I'm at home a lot, and I'll find I'll go, well, I don't know if I'll go days in a row without going outside, but it'll certainly feel that way. And that's a problem with that lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we are right now. Like in Phoenix, it's 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So, dude, it's like, I mean, I just got a workout in the garage. My garage is 95 degrees. I'm still just sweating my butt off, but I don't have to, leave the house. And it was funny. It was kind of fun and funny during COVID, but now it's like, dude, my wife's like, you still don't leave the house. I'm like, yeah, good point.
Okay.
So, okay. So definitely having structure, and I heard you, allude to like, okay, having a morning routine. And I'd actually love to know kind of what you observe is kind of just like an easy and successful morning routine. And I suppose by that same token is like, or at least what I've observed is having an evening routine, right? So we can like bookend the day. Obviously it contributes to effective sleep. We can all agree that that's paramount. So, and I think between those two, like it really can create the foundation for success in terms of building that structure, building those wins. So like, what do you see just from a daily, like the 1, 2, 3 things that people can focus in on for morning and evening?
Yeah, I'm a huge morning routine guy. And the number one thing about them is that everybody's is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like for me, if ideally as they say, like the morning routine begins the night before.
Yeah, totally.
I never can do that. Like I'd love to be able to do that, but for me, like that last 20, 30 minutes before I fall asleep, it's either eating or I'm usually doing something with my kid. Or I'm just not sitting with a pen and paper, like collecting my thoughts. But if I just get up in my day and I don't have any idea what I'm doing, just trying to start doing stuff, I will be completely unproductive.
Yeah.
I'll just go in a circle, like a black hole of, poor time management. But so what I do is I get up at 4:30, and probably the first 15 minutes is I'm just looking at my day, and I'm just like, okay, what are my appointments? What are, my business has things I got to do every day, like, emails and stuff like that. And then what are the kind of the themes for the day? Like for me, it's either it's writing programs or writing content or writing. So I kind of schedule that first. And now it's summer, and so my kid is in school. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit more, where's he at? Who's looking after him today?
Yeah.
But I figure that out very quickly. In those windows where he's not around, that's when I either do some deep work, whether it's writing, or get in my workout. And as soon as so it's first thing in the morning, I kind of plan that out. It takes me about half an hour. By that time, the caffeine's kicked in, and that's when I go outside and I get either a 30 to 60-minute walk, depending on how much time I got. And that has been, if I could bottle that as an antidepressant, I would. I mean, that I feel so much better. And it's interesting. I keep journals every year because I always, as a bodybuilder, I always kind of diet every year. And I keep a little journal of how things are going. And I just noticed looking over the years that my entries in the spring, April, May, June, were always so much more positive, and I'm like, and obviously it's spring and it's nice out here, but I really think it's because those are the times when I'm getting up early and I'm going outside and walking.
Sunlight and moving. Yeah.
So, and by the time I get home from that, then really it's on. My kid is up, so I get him ready. And as soon as he's out as soon as I'm back from taking him wherever he needs to be, it's do a couple hours of work, and I try to work out around noon. Okay. Consistently. And then after that, it's back in the office.
Okay. So morning routine, few seemingly simple things, but for most people, I've observed this as well. It's like, dude, win your morning, win your day. So waking up early, oftentimes before other people, and you got to be proactive about it, is get up and kind of know what you're going to tackle and kind of have a systematic process for that.
Oh yeah. And even though my day isn't planned in the morning, everything is set up for me in the morning that I get up and I plan my day. That makes sense. Like I got my water here. I got, I just get up and everything's there in play. So I just, sit at my desk and I start going. There's no, I'm not searching on, I'm not on my phone. That's the number one thing I do. I do not go on my phone. I might check my email or see if something blew up. But I'm not on social media, anything like that. And I just immediately look at, what's on my calendar. What do I got to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you take the same approach with your clientele. It's like, okay, what does the morning routine look like? What are we committing to?
Mhm.
And how are we weaving in your fitness? And then what
Yeah.
I'd like to do is I'd like to, expand this
Mhm.
conversation into kind of building out the nutrition throughout the day. But
Yeah.
first and foremost is like for most of your clients, like when are you weaving in fitness and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. Like that's on the very first call that we have, like right after they sign up. The first thing I do is I get them on the phone, which might be a little counterintuitive for an online business, but that's what I try to figure out is I say, tell me about your day. What's your day like? And, and I try to get as granular as I can, meaning like their commute, how many kids you got,
Yeah.
So I can figure out when they can comfortably or confidently say, yeah, I'm going to work out around 4 p.m. or 4 a.m., whatever it is. Because that's once I have that info, then I can start building their workout. It's not even, I won't even build a workout for someone unless I know not only the days of the week or the number of days they want to train, but the time of day and stuff. And even because I can figure out right away if they're overextending.
Totally.
So I try to hear, oh yeah, I think I can work out 5 days a week. I got 3 kids,
Right.
2 are in hockey. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, 5 days a week. Okay. Where's your gym? Oh, it's about half hour from the house. I'm like, okay, fuck, this is not gonna.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I like the specificity because it's almost like you're challenging the client.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so I appreciate the fact that you think you're going to train 4 or 5 days a week, but tell me specifically, like, when are you going to do this? How are you going to fit that in? Okay. How about we make it, and the sign of any good coach is like, listen, we got to make this realistic for you. And then this is part of the art of coaching is like, okay, how do we realistically weave this in so we can start to build momentum? And maybe, right. Maybe we start to progress into 4, maybe 5 days, if even necessary. And so let's talk nutrition. And what are you seeing in terms of kind of the big priorities for your clientele in terms of like meals, macros, meal timing? Like what's the general needle movers that you're observing right now?
Well, the number one thing, I keep saying it's the number one thing. I gotta pick a new axiom.
Well, with respect to nutrition, I think
the number one thing, version 3. With respect to nutrition, the number one thing I find is you can get them to hit a protein goal. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying if you can hit a protein goal, it cures all your problems. It cures the calorie problem. It cures no. But if you can get someone to consistently hit a protein target, if that's the only thing they'll track, let me caveat that way. Like if that's the only thing they'll say, all right, I'll track my damn protein. If you can get them to do that, not only are they going to eat enough protein, they'll probably eat a lot less other stuff that you don't want them eating. And the biggest thing is they're going to be engaged.
Yeah.
Okay. They're like, they're okay, how much is in this damn thing? And they're putting in their app or they're doing the math, whatever. And without even asking them to track their macros or their calories, they're doing it.
Right.
Probably to about 80% of, if they were actually aggressively tracking all those things directly. So I try to get people at least tracking protein. That's probably the biggest rock. Now, again, context is everything. If someone's a seasoned bodybuilder, they're used to, tracking things, then obviously it's too simplistic a step. But that's probably the in terms of a quick and dirty that's effective, I would do that because it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, scope of this conversation, we're definitely talking general population. And so I think that's super relevant. And I'm assuming your general recommendations are working up to around a gram per pound of ideal body weight.
Exactly. And again, this always comes after I've spoken to them and said, okay, tell me about your diet,
right.
And then have them, okay, let's keep a food log. So that's what they tell me about their diet, what they're actually eating. That can be different.
What's usually the biggest shift that people need to make in terms of like what they're currently doing to what they need to start doing in terms of, I guess, like which meals tend to make the biggest change? Do they need to add meals? Do they need to reduce the number of meals? Like where's some of the limiting factors that are obstacles that people tend to run into?
First of all, they got to prepare. It's where people, the number one thing, the number one obstacle. Here's another number. The number one obstacle I see is these decisions made when you're home at work, it's 4:30, get home. There's nothing in the fridge, or there's nothing fast in the fridge. There's always lots of food, but nothing that's fast. Maybe you have a couple of kids who are crying and they're hungry. And so you make a convenience decision.
Yep.
Whereas if you had a little bit of planning in advance, maybe you could have had a pre-made meal. Maybe you could have made something in advance, like things like that. Those kind of obstacles are they're very pervasive, and they're very problematic. Apart from that, people often think that they have a lot more variety in their diet than they really do. And so you say, okay, let's follow a meal plan. And they'll be like, oh, no, I need variety. And then you're like, really? Do you really need that much variety? Because you probably eat the same breakfast every day. Lunch is might not be an ideal choice, but it's probably, maybe it's one of 3 different fast food joints, but there's probably not a lot of variety. And dinner tends to be more of a crapshoot. Totally. Even snacks are often very, very consistent. So when you get people to take a big picture look at their diet, they're like, wow, I do eat the same shit every day. Like, yeah, you do. So how about we just take those things that you're already eating, and we make it better? Maybe we narrow down the portions, or maybe we just improve the choices, like do little things like that. And then all of a sudden, that's a kind of a mind shift where they're like, yeah, this isn't so bad. I'm already eating this way anyway.
Right. It sounds liberating to me.
Yeah.
For someone to acknowledge, it's like, ooh, like that's almost a relief, because I thought I was going to have to overhaul everything, but I really, I do like eating eggs in the morning. And so if I can keep eating eggs, but I can maybe add, some vegetables or whatever to it, pick up a piece of fruit, or, he told me I don't, I can still eat out at lunch. I just obviously have to work a little bit harder to make sure I'm getting enough protein. But if I can reasonably do that, well, that's, like I said, that's reassuring for me to know that I don't have to, do meal container prep every Sunday and have the whole kitchen counter lined up.
Exactly. And then, and people have 3 choices at dinner that they can rotate through. Either they prepare them or they whatever. They have 3 choices kind of in their back pocket. Then that's enough variety typically. Yeah. And then there's the snacks. It's the later you get in the day, it's the worse the choices tend to be. So if you can kind of, breakfast is usually pretty good. Lunch typically needs work. Dinners, that's, again, that's the one you tend to have to overhaul a little bit, or at least tighten up. And the snacks, and that snacks includes wine and spirits and stuff like that. You nail that down, it's a very, very simple process, really. Not easy, but very, very simple.
Do you find best practices around kind of 3 to 4 meals per day? Meals,
like the bodybuilder in me will always say, okay, at least 4 meals a day, at least 20 grams of protein, max out protein synthesis. And I still believe that's optimal. Yeah. But the practical person in me just let's just, whatever you're used to eating, whatever your natural rhythm is, it's one of the, if you have a very kind of structured breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's great. Let's rock that. What I try not to impose, I try to keep things as consistent with their natural rhythms, their natural habits as possible. And it's very rare that I have to insert meals, or, it's just rare.
So it's just, we're trying to minimize resistance here.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that you recommend everyone intermittent fast.
Basically. Everyone. Yeah. And keto, cool. Keto, vegan, right. Intermittent fast.
Perfect. Keto, vegan. Perfect.
You just eat canola. You drink a bottle of canola before bed. That's okay.
Yes, it's anabolic. So let's talk a little bit about social support, and how big of a factor is social support in someone's success, and perhaps how should we be thinking about that as someone who perhaps is just really starting to get into their health journey or making some concerted change? What do we need to be aware of?
Well, the number one support is always at home. And I think it's a big ask. If you're married and you want to get in shape, I think it's a pretty tall ask to say, okay, spouse, husband, wife, you got to do this with me.
Oh yeah.
That's but at the same time, where I'm going, you don't want to have the sabotage effect. You don't want to have, so if you can at least have somebody who is, they don't even have to be enthusiastically supportive, but as long as they're like, are you doing this? I'm not going to wave pizza under your nose. I'm not going to, dibble it. That's kind of an obvious example, but just little things to undercut you, whether it's, not have the foods around that you need, or just
It might sound obvious. I'm sorry to interrupt. It might sound obvious, but you and I both know that it's not always kind of like common sense or sensical for that relationship. In other words, like sometimes subconsciously there's quote unquote sabotage going on, and maybe rationalizing from the significant other, like they might feel a bit resentful that their partner's taking these concerted health steps while they feel like, oh, well, I'm not ready to do that. But
that can get really dark. I've seen, relationships completely fall apart because, I have to play analyst, but like one party's in, like, oh, you're getting too hot, getting too hot. You just want to leave me because you're that kind of thing. Or you're all into yourself now. When the thing is, well, that the person who said that is just doesn't feel good about themselves.
Right.
And, but 90% of the time, it's just like the other person just, they're just, if they don't want to go on the journey with them, maybe they'll be like, whoa, you gotta, what do you mean you don't eat this? But, usually they're just, as long as they're not aggressively, talking you out of it or trying to sabotage, that's enough.
Yeah.
But again, outside of the home, in terms of support structures, I mean, that's the benefit. That's what CrossFit did so well.
Right.
And this, if you can have a community, that is, if you can't, especially if you can't have it at home, if you can have a community of support, that's huge. Just think of the gyms that we know about off the top of our head. Like, what are they like? Gold's Venice and Westside Barbell and Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym in New York. Like, they're always these. They're a community of bodybuilders, a community of athletes. So
like-minded individuals that are all kind of similar kind of identities. And I think with respect to in the home, because I agree with you, it can be a slippery slope. I think, one of the most important things is to just really drive home like this level of communication that needs to take place around, like 95% of the time, like there's no reason your spouse would not be supportive of like, you want to get healthier for our family and like set a better example for our kids and like look better. Like, that's amazing, right? Most spouses, I would absolutely support that. I think it's just important for sometimes there's an overt level or expectations at play where for those of us that are undergoing the journey, like we're learning all of this stuff. We're learning like, oh, protein's really important. And I have to set a morning routine. Like I need to get up at a certain time. And there's certain things that I need to prioritize. And we kind of put those expectations on our spouse to be like, oh, why didn't you know? Like we need to have a protein dense dinner. And so that requires like this level of communication to say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm learning. Here's where I could use the support. And this is specifically what that looks like. Would it be reasonable for us to kind of work together to be able to, to do that, meals, time, schedule?
Yeah. And way more often than not, that's kind of the way it travels. It's like, okay, they have a discussion. One half of the relationship says, I want to do this. The other, maybe they're not along with it, but they're at least supportive. And more often than not, they do it too. And it's just, maybe they just see that the other person feels better. They look better. It's rare that one person's going completely on a healthy tangent. The other one just, I'm staying. Stick with.
You're on your own, mofo. You're on your own.
Yeah.
100%. And then, I think you hit the nail on the head outside of the house, but it's just like, listen, man, if you're finding that, you're in the bar with chicken wings and beer every weekend, because the boys are pulling you into watching football, and you're not making progress, like, you might want to consider changing that support system.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's, what's the expression? You're the average of the five people you spent. Yeah. That's so true. So true. And you know, and I do feel for people, especially I always feel bad for like single moms, you know, like that's, you know, their time is stretched, their money is stretched. You know, they're the sole provider for their children.
Yep.
And then they got to find this other gear. Okay, now I got to make the best food choices for myself, you know, because you know how kids eat, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's like, I got to prepare 2 meals.
yeah,
And then you got
exactly.
the dickhead trainer who's like, they should eat what you eat. And
Okay, yeah. Oh God. Oh, I know. Or the 20-something trainer who lectures a single mom, you know, we all have the same 24 hours in the day.
right. 100%.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah, they definitely like that. You know, my heart always goes out to them because that's tough. And especially another classic demographic who usually has to get up ridiculously early, either to prep meals or do a little bit of exercise before the kids take over the day because there's no one else to help.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So speaking of, because I just think about stress when, you know, we talk about kind of the single mom, but how do we um how do we consider stress as a role in kind of this whole process? I almost want to say, like, how do we quantify stress? But I guess, like, what role does stress really play in this process? And at what point do we really need to, like, you know, take it into consideration, I suppose?
Well, it's such a nebulous term, and I've thrown it
Mhm.
around probably a little too haphazardly myself, like stress. Oh, what
Right.
is stress? Everyone's got freaking stress, and stress is highly like, uh, it's you ever in line at Walmart and there's like the cashier maybe has starts to fall behind a little and you can just see her, she's getting stressed, she's getting like she's her
Mm.
hands are starting to shake because maybe there's a long line and her manager's glaring at her. Even though in the grand scheme of things, like it's not life or death. Maybe you're inconveniencing someone by a minute or two. Whereas someone who's like a surgeon and it's not going well, they're losing their patient. They'll probably be exhibiting even less signs of stress, even
Mm-hmm.
though the stakes are much, much higher. So I
Mm-hmm.
think stress is something, the more you're exposed to it, especially higher, the more you just adapt and you still remain functional. So my point is like, what you think you can't handle, oftentimes you can handle it once you fucking handle it, you can handle it. But I do think one way you can avoid unnecessary stress, especially in this fitness process, is avoiding all the rules and all the dogma and all the just a perfect example, like training programs. Oh, I got to work out 4 times a week, and I gotta hit each body part twice a week, and I have to. It's like, really? No, like none
Mm-hmm.
of these things are hard and fast rules, and they're all contextually dependent on you and your circumstances and how much time and effort you can devote to this process. And so when you kind of put yourself first, all of a sudden all these other, and say, okay, what my needs are first, like my schedule, my kids, my commute, that's all first, and everything else has to fit into that. And it'll still work. Maybe it won't be optimal, but it'll still work. When you adopt that mindset, a lot of stress kind of drifts away.
Yes.
Then you get up in the morning and you're like, oh, I just don't have time for a workout, and I'm supposed to do legs today. But you know what? It doesn't matter. I can just do it tomorrow. My body will still recover. Even if I got to do legs and upper body, I'm back to all this bullshit that people worry about. The body will figure it out. So when you kind of realize that all these hard and fast rules, like whether it's, I got to cut out food at 8 p.m. and all this bullshit that I hear, like all this stuff is just nonsense and it doesn't move the needle. When you just forget all that, a lot of the time the stress kind of goes down.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that perspective. And it's definitely one of the things that I took away from our last conversation as being just like a really salient point, because it's just the shift in the mindset to give ourselves permission to just like be okay rolling with the punches, especially when we work with like analytical, hard charging individuals and they're like, I want to optimize, tell me the exact process. Right. And it's almost like it digs them into a deeper hole because they get overly concerned around the minutia that is almost setting them back. It's like, dude, if you just chill out a little bit and accept that we're going to focus on some of the big needle movers, and
Yeah.
And there's some great learning opportunities along the way, so that when you feel like you screwed up, we'll just leverage it as a bonus, whether it's learning opportunity, a deload, a cheat meal, whatever you want. You call it whatever the hell you want, but it's like, those are the behaviors, those are the ways that you're going to develop those skills. And that's how ultimately, like, you're going to give yourself permission to be successful long term, because the last thing we need is a 75 hard to tell me, oh, I didn't get in my second workout of the day on day 74 and I failed. It's like, dude, you just did 74 days of training like twice a day. You exactly, stuff like that.
I know. And it's hard for people to, especially kind of come from a harder core background. It's a hard thing to embrace and to accept. It's like, oh man, I'm not going to be wishy-washy. If I want to do this, I want to do it as hard as I can, man. I'll level up. But just some things are just not worth leveling up for. Like, there is a point of diminishing returns, and a lot of the stuff, like you say, use the term needle movers. A lot of just stuff that people worry about does not move the needle. And and God help you if you go online, just people will argue about the most mundane shit that just, what glute exercise you do, like that kind of thing. It makes such a small difference in the average human's, gym outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like something we also talked about on the last call, is like the calories and the sets and the reps just don't outweigh the mindset shifts, the behaviors, the consistency, the prioritization, and just the structure, right, that we need to develop.
Like, I can confess, years ago, if I showed up at the gym and whatever reason, something just, I was late for whatever reason, I would just turn around, go home, fuck it, I'll come back later when I could do my, granted, this is a long time ago. Nowadays it'd be like, all right, 20 minutes. I got 20 minutes. All right, man. Well, I won't be able to squat today because, it takes me that long for this old body to warm up, but 20 minutes and it's leg day. I can crush out leg extensions, leg curls. I could do some lunges. I could probably hammer myself in 15 to 20 minutes and leave thinking, all right, wasn't perfect, but damn it, that was good enough, And then the next leg day, maybe I'll leave a little bit earlier and make sure I get everything done.
It's this mental malleability to just be able to embrace, like, okay, what do I have to work with? Cool. I'll make it happen. I just do it the best that I can, given the circumstances, and we'll move forward from there. And when you can consistently, it's the same thing, like we talked about that morning routine, just like stacking wins, just one thing after the next. And you really are setting the stage. It's that compounding interest, right, for long-term success. So moving on, and one of the things that is really, I'm going to say, is becoming more and more recognized is the role of cardiovascular health, right? Because we go through these ebbs and flows of in the fitness industry, and depending on which mentor or what sort of dogma we're learning from, we hear, okay, all you need is resistance training, or we should be doing HIIT training, or whatever. And so we're understanding the implications of and the role of cardiovascular health, right? Especially when we talk about men over 40, like especially like that are carrying more body fat. This is becoming paramount, that we truly know how to positively impact these guys. How do you look at metabolic health, blood pressure, and cardiovascular exercise with respect to the men and women that you work with?
Well, definitely longevity. And if longevity is the goal, it should always be a goal. Cardiovascular exercise is number one. And it's unfortunate that this binary thing happened. Like, you're either, and I went through it too. And it's like, oh,
me too.
Weight, and I do believe you could do a lot with weight training, and you can, especially if you have a good aerobic base, you can maintain, you won't improve it with weight training, even really, really intense, kind of like, higher rep training. You can maintain kind of some of that aerobic capability, but you're certainly not going to improve it. You certainly won't do anything for your VO2 max. You have to train those things, make it a priority. Now, you can do that concurrently with strength training. Now, is it is one, is it better to focus on one or the other? It's probably best rather to focus on one for a brief period of time, then focus on the other for the balance of the year. But there's the days of just weight training. That's just a terrible approach.
I think with our lifestyles,
Yeah,
it's very few and far between that we have someone coming in who's aerobically trained, who has an aerobic base. Like, listen, man, we are very, very sedentary individuals. So our culture's lending itself to all of these cardiovascular risks. And this is where I think it becomes so paramount to just understand the value of physical activity, especially aerobic physical activity, and improving cardiovascular fitness. And again, it's just like, dude,
the data is there that it's aerobic, it's cardiovascular health, and it's aerobic exercise. That's what pushes the life extension. And again, it actually improves your weight training outcomes, because if you perform, cardiovascular exercise in that zone 2, it's not that demanding. You can still hold a conversation while you're doing it. I mean, it takes up a lot of time. I think the last recommendations I saw was 45 minutes 4 times a week. I mean, that's a decent chunk of time. But it's easy. You can actually do work while you're doing that kind of exercise.
Right.
Can a brisk walk around the block get you to that zone 2? I think it can. I get pretty close. And it makes your weight training better. It does not it doesn't conflict with weight training whatsoever. Yeah. And the only downside is there's only so many hours in the day. So it can make sense just from a purely practical time management perspective. Maybe you have phases of the year,
right,
where, maybe when it's cold out, you do 3 or 4 intense, heavy weight training sessions and maybe a couple of cardio sessions. And then when it's nice out, you flip the script. Then you're hitting all these training outcomes. And like the days of this, that was a phase, I think it was 10 years ago. It's like, no, cardio makes you fat and cardio makes you weak and slow. And it's just ridiculous. And it's just, if you do hours a day at a high intensity, it's like if you do hours a day at a high intensity, it's going to conflict with weight training.
Well, I think it's just the differences between, there was so much talk around, you can just do 6 minutes or 4 minutes of high intensity, and it's as effective as 60 minutes of 30 or 60 minutes of aerobic training. And then we have all these HIIT classes and, intense boot camp classes. And so what I want our listeners to understand, because I've spoken about this before, is like, listen, bottom line, like low hanging fruit here for someone, because in my experience and what I'm observing, for what it's worth, is like the vast majority of people coming into a program who are ready to start to make change do not have an existing aerobic base, which you don't have to go to the gym and like throw yourself into spin classes or boot camp or, at F45 and doing all these crazy, like bouncing around and pretty high impact, like seemingly ridiculous classes, unless you love it. Great. Like that's awesome. But this is where you can just go out and do a brisk walk. And if you can get your heart rate into the zone 2, and this is what I appreciate from some of Peter Attia's stuff, it's like just really bringing life to and value to understanding what that means and how we can implement it and do that for 4 to 6 to 8 weeks and see the changes that it makes in terms of how you feel, like we talked about from the very beginning, and your resting heart rate and your quality of sleep and your anxiety and like all of these things. Like we've got a massively beneficial tool at our disposal that has such a low barrier to entry. And I think it's also worthwhile mentioning, it's like, listen, for coaches that are listening, and I've been one of these for so long. So I'm taking, I'm fully acknowledging that this is something that I flat out ignored for a long time, but we can't ignore it any longer, because people, like, we say longevity, but people are fucking dying in their 40s from a stroke, because their blood pressure's through the roof and they don't know it. Yeah.
And that one of the dumbest things, I see coaches do this all the time, is they'll get someone who has never really exercised much before. Maybe they have high blood pressure, high resting heart rate. They don't have any aerobic training behind them, and they'll just right away, we're just going to lift weights because that's how you shape your body. Lift weights because that's the best form of exercise. And
Right.
yes, weight training I think is the best form of exercise, but that is a person who should start with lots of steady state zone 2 cardio work, build up that aerobic base, and then lower the blood pressure, lower resting heart rate, get some pounds off.
Right.
And then, and expand the mitochondria. You want to get really technical.
Right.
And then starts, especially when it starts to, because aerobic training does, you start to adapt to it. To a degree, but then start bringing in more weight training. But just to throw somebody who's relatively detrained and in terrible shape and with high blood pressure, just throwing them into just weight training, bad idea.
Yeah. Cool. I agree. And I wanted to bring some light to that because I think that's perhaps one of the most valuable things that we as tenured trainers, so to speak, is something that it needs to be discussed. It needs to be discussed. And I don't think it's being discussed enough. So,
because we look at things always either through our lens of, if you have any type of bodybuilding in you, you're like, oh, what helps me hold on to or build the most muscle? Or we look at the outliers. There's always that one person. Oh, I got in fantastic shape without doing any cardio. Well, first of all, they're an outlier. And second of all, fantastic shape. How? They have low body fat. That's great. It's great to see, but are they actually in good shape? What's their VO2 max? What's their resting heart rate? So there's more, it's more than just what's meets the eye.
It's always, it's always reading between the lines. And that's part of why I wanted to have you back on and just even diving into some of these areas. I hope that for people listening, they're really understanding the nuances that are involved in this process, like not only in the nutrition itself and the exercise itself and the structure involved in someone's lifestyle, of course, in the science around these things, but I'm hoping that this is opening people's eyes to doing justice to their own health journey and saying, listen, when you're scrolling, you have to figure out how to take things into context. And it's very, very challenging to put things into context with only so many characters, and no expression or tonality around what's being said and quick blurbs. And it's the nature of the beast. But I guess I think a relevant question and kind of an ending question for you would be, if and when someone is ready to undergo kind of this health coaching process, start to make some concerted change, they're looking for a coach, what do you think that they should be looking for?
Well, the practical side of me is always, this is because I spend so much time on the internet and I see so much, buffoonery. Look for somebody with verifiable success with populations similar to yourself. Do they work with people around your age, your demographic, and do they have verifiable, do they have testimonials? Do they have, people that you could even contact, as opposed to just, and I know it sounds like just looking at a string of before and afters, but
we won't go there.
You need to have some type of social proof that you can look at. And can you just talk to them before you sign on the dotted line, so to speak? I think a reason that people steer so much towards doing business online is that, is because it avoids having that conversation where you can probably sniff out somebody who's full of shit. That's what I'm trying to say. That's another thing. If you actually happen to know someone personally who's had a really good success with a coach, there's nothing better than that. But probably, just the one thing I want people to avoid is just the last thing you want to do is just, oh, that person looks great, I want to hire them to coach me. Because that is, even if they're the same age as you, and even if they've gone, even if they had a great transformation or whatever, just I'm very, in my business, I'm very I very rarely talk about what I do, not because there's some great mystery or secrets, just because I always tell my clients, it just won't apply to you.
Right.
I won't apply to you. I do this all day. This is all I think about. It's really, really depressing.
And you've been doing it for so long.
And I've been doing it for so long.
No offense.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, not take fucking spade's a spade. So I'll tell them what I do, but I'm like, don't do that. Just don't do this. Let's figure out what works best for you. It's such a goofy industry that way, is that we kind of put our brains on hold and we're like, that person looks good, I want to do what they do, without even considering all the context behind it.
Yeah.
But that is a very good question. Like, where does one start? I just know what I wouldn't do. And I want to look like that guy. That's the one person I wouldn't hire.
I would definitely do my diligence around all of the aforementioned things and just have a conversation.
Yeah.
Someone. It's like, I mean, if you are so sold on a program, and it's, I guess the investment is so reasonable that you can just warrant, I guess, signing up right away. I think that's one thing, but I also think that, there needs to be a reasonable investment for you to kind of commit to long-term success, which usually necessitates a conversation. And that's where having that conversation should be leveraged around, okay, like really two-way street of feeling out your prospective coach, making sure that they feel like you're a right fit for the program and that they have the tools to be able to help you get great success, and that they're willing to acknowledge if they don't have the tools, that they're not the right fit for you, and that they're not like desperately needing you to sign the dotted line. Like that's, in my eyes, I think is definitely something that is warranted.
Yeah, I think I think it's very important if you especially if you're not sure on someone, if you can, especially if you can get them on the phone. I know I don't do sales calls. Nothing against that. I don't do sales calls, but if someone wants to say, "Hey, man, I just want to talk to you about what you do," maybe that is a sales call. I'll do that. I'll tell them, okay, this is the approach I would take with you. This is what I would do. And then if they join up, that's great. But I think that kind of extra step is really, really important, especially if you're not sure. And just to stress again, if all a coach has is pics of themselves, that is, to me, like to me, that is a red flag of somebody who's probably lacking confidence, because they haven't made that connection in their head yet as a coach. Wait, none of this is really about me. Like, I look great, whatever, but all that shows is time put in. Like, I'm the first to be, I look the way I do because I'm 50 years old and I've been working out since I'm 14. Like, right. God, I better look at least like, come on, man. But it's like that. It's not a sales tool. Like, it's not a selling point. If they could show you people they worked with, or they could show you their processes, or they could just frankly just show their character. That's probably number one. If you can get an idea of someone's character just by the way how professional they are and how they answer your questions and just how they carry themselves on social media, things like that. It's often what people don't say. It's what they don't do that tells me kind of, okay, someone who's not always fighting and just, putting up selfies, but someone who's actually trying to be helpful. And like, that's okay. There's someone there, there's some substance there.
I think that's part of why conversations like this are helpful for people, is because it gives us the opportunity to just be ourselves, have real world conversations, like legitimately, like selfishly, like this is the best way for me to connect with people like you, other, people in the industry whom I respect and want to learn from them and reinforce ideas and just whatever, make great connections and network. And then, similarly, as it gives people an insight into who we are, what we do, how we think, and an ability to just be transparent. At the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing. So I'm glad and honored to have the ability to, be able to support you in that. And hopefully that can help send people your way. Similarly, I'm excited for you and your upcoming speaking gigs. Is that anything like you want to share about that? Is that worth sharing here?
Oh yeah, it's worth sharing. It's if you're in Western Canada, it's the name escapes me. My friend Andrew
We
Coates
can put it in
if you put it up yet.
We can put it in the show notes, but
yeah. And the Silverback Summit in November,
okay,
which is more of a men's health, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. My friend Ali Gilbert's putting it on, and it's more for the guys, but it's all about just living, training, and optimization in your 40s and 50s. And it's really cool niche, and a lot of great info there. And that will be in Texas.
That's in Austin. Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
we'll connect there. And then for those of you guys and gals, to be fair, listening that want to come bro out, I'll put the link down below because it's going to be a great opportunity to connect with Bryan, myself, other coaches in the industry, and lots of just, cool individuals who are also meatheads that want to learn and grow and connect with good people. Anything else?
No, that's it, man. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Cool, man. Dude, always a pleasure. We will definitely do it again soon. Good luck with everything coming up. I'll look forward to seeing you in person in November. Take care, brother.
You bet. Thanks.
Bye.